Should the next generation of consoles be cancelled? I've seen a lot of people talking this week about whether or not the next Xbox and the next PlayStation should be delayed or cancelled or pushed back a few years. And today I'm going to be explaining the reasons why those people think that, talking about what my opinions are, and also going through what some of your opinions are about the subject as well. So Xbox published this to their newswire this week, updating the prices of the Xbox console. So this is effective the 1st of August 2026. We'll be updating prices worldwide. The price of Xbox consoles will increase by $100 for 512 gigabyte models and $150 for 1 terabyte models. We will also be sunsetting our 2 terabyte model. Last October, we increased Xbox console price by $20 to $70 in the US. We hoped another price increase would not be necessary, and we have spent the last several months working with suppliers on options. Unfortunately, console storage and memory prices have increased by more than 2.5 times, and we expect another doubling by the fall of 2027. The entire consumer electronics industry is struggling with the current components crisis, but the effects are particularly hard on consoles. Unlike phones, computers, speakers, and other consumer devices, consoles are typically not sold at a profit, but instead for less than they cost to make. But the main thing here was the current components crisis. So I thought it was worthwhile going in depth with this and talking about what this actually means. So I found this article on BBC News, which was titled "Why Everything from Your Phone to Your PC May Get Pricier." The cost of lots of devices we all use could be forced up in 2026 because of the price of RAM. Once one of the cheapest computer components has more than doubled since October 2025. Its price has shot up because of the explosive growth in the data centers which power AI, which need RAM too. That's caused an imbalance, supply and demand, which means everyone has to pay more. Manufacturers often choose to swallow small cost increases, but big ones tend to get passed on to consumers, which is something that we're seeing. And these increases are anything but small. We are being quoted costs around 500% higher than they were only a couple of months ago, this person said. He said there'll come a point where these increased component costs will force manufacturers to make decisions about pricing. If it uses memory or storage, there is a potential for price increases, which is obviously what we've seen. I decided to post onto a subreddit yesterday. What I posted was, do you actually think next-gen consoles will get delayed because of memory costs, or are Xbox and PlayStation already locked in? This person said, they may have small delays, but I think once they are ready, they will release them. Not going to sit on them and lose out on the money they've already spent developing them. The business side will have to think outside of the box on how to sell them. I'm thinking something similar to how phones are sold, where you basically pay a monthly fee or finance it up front. So this is something that I've discussed in previous videos, and I've seen other people also discuss this in videos, and it was also mentioned briefly actually on the Xbox Newswire just then as well. Someone put, I think next gen will be delayed, but not by much. You can't really delay for too long and wait for hardware to age. Parts and components for the most part are probably already decided. They've already been developing these consoles for years now. If they're meant to come out at the end of next year in 2027 and they push it back to 2028 or 2029 or even 2030, the trouble is that with the rate of improvement with stuff like PC parts, for example, each year they're getting more outdated and more outdated. Someone else said people want them delayed because they don't understand a key thing: contracts. Sony is locked in, Microsoft is locked in. They could delay them, but they're locked into production contracts on the chips they have already slated for the next-gen consoles. Microsoft and Sony will have signed contracts with various companies to develop the components for the new consoles. And obviously to delay those consoles or even sort of postpone them or just cancel them for the foreseeable future potentially causes issues with those contracts that they've signed with the various developers. I do agree with the people that say that there's already contracts in place. I'm not an expert on how that works, but that must be the case. I think Sony and Microsoft have obviously got their suppliers of various components. They've signed the contracts. Those component suppliers are obviously relying on that business and relying on that contract. And I don't know how easy it would be for Sony and Microsoft to basically just like say we're not actually going to need you for 2 or 3 years. Also, it does feel close, the next generation being next year. I think even though it's the same length as some of the previous generations, being 7 years, the fact that the first few years of this generation was COVID, as well as the fact that, as I say, the crossover has been so long that this year's Call of Duty is the first year that Call of Duty are just on current gen consoles and not Xbox One and PS4. I think it's felt really that the consoles have only come into their own really in the last year or two. As well as that, obviously, we're talking about both consoles in this video, but for Xbox at least, it puts Xbox in an extremely sticky situation if they decide to delay the next generation of consoles, because Xbox made the choice in 2023 or 2024 to not release a Pro version of the Series X, whereas PlayStation obviously went with the PS5 Pro. I think their logic for not going with like a Series X Pro made sense at the time. Obviously, in the PS4 and the Xbox One generation, the reason for there being a Pro was because 4K TVs didn't really exist at the beginning of the generation, but came in during the generation, and they wanted a console that supported 4K resolution. Obviously, there isn't really a version of that this time around. The only thing really that could be argued is the idea of having 4K and 60 frames per second at the same time. But Xbox and Phil obviously made that decision at the time to not go ahead with that, which probably made sense at the time. But if they'd have known about, not that they could have, but if they'd have known about this crisis with the components and known that maybe the next generation will be delayed until 2030, for example, then maybe they would have considered that, because it means now that if they do delay until 2030, that they've got 4 years ahead where PlayStation have a significantly more powerful console on the market than them. If the next generation of consoles did come out at the end of next year, like, I'd still be excited, and depending on the price, I'd probably still get one, even if it meant doing some kind of finance or saving up for it in the months up towards it or something like that. But it doesn't feel significantly needed. If they do release the consoles at the end of next year, then if they are priced at some stupid price like $1,000, for example, it's going to be mainly the enthusiast market that's going to buy them. I would say people like me who are really, really into it, people probably like you watching who are really into it, but I definitely know quite a few people that wouldn't upgrade. Even if it was like 700-800, probably wouldn't upgrade and would keep their Series X or PS5. So already they're not going to be selling to the same amount of people, because they're only going to be selling to enthusiasts. There's a chance that we're getting the PS6 and the Xbox whatever next at the end of next year, which feels extremely soon, but you know, it's the same length as a normal generation, and I think this generation has just been a messy one. If you've got an opinion, I'd love to hear it. Comment down below, let me know what you think on the whole situation, whether or not you feel that the next generation should be delayed, whether it shouldn't be delayed. Are you happy with your current console? Let me know.